Thanks for volunteering. I'll pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend. Did you want a photograph taken with the board tonight?
Oh, yeah, go back there.
Now,
Bring somebody special.
Right.
next item on the agenda, 300.19 is the roll call. Mr. Neal?
Yes, just a moment here, let me get my little sheet out. Ms. Hines?
Present.
Mr. Neal, yes. President, Mr. Buckaloo?
Here.
Mrs. Bedell?
I'm here.
Mrs. Walker? Dr. Weaver?
Here.
And Mr. Cox?
Present.
All present.
Next item on the agenda, 301.19 is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for the citizens to speak on items that appear on the agenda. Are there any citizens that would like to address the board on agenda items this evening? Anyone? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to 302.19, Board of Education Finance Committee report. The Treasurer, Tom Buckaloo. Mr. Buckaloo.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Cox. We have two reports this evening. One is from our March 25th, 2019 meeting, at which we tried to address a number of important issues that were in need of some addressing. So, if you'll permit, staffing issues in the business office were discussed. In 2017, the district's auditing firm of Plant Moran had recommended having 2 people oversee the department. There has only been 1 since then. Currently, there is an ongoing decision around how the business office should be staffed with the best people for the positions. Head Start reports are up to date. Issues with grants are being addressed. The business office is receiving help and support from 2 consultants who are retired business officials, as well as from the finance department at RISA. Funds from the sinking fund are not being used right now. Our enhancement millage is being used as needed. The bond issue is on track. The first payment is scheduled for May 29th, 2019. There will be no construction this summer. All obligations to employee insurance, FICA, and the Michigan Public Service Employee Retirement Service System are all current. Club and team bank accounts are now managed by the business office. Plant Moran advised the district to hire another administrator in the business office. Dr. Holt will work with department leaders, consultants from RISA, and MyExcel for input into staffing, and is confident we'll get back to where we were. A complete copy of the minutes from this meeting can be found on page 2 in the agenda book for this evening's meeting. Those were the minutes from March.
Thank you.
I have another set of minutes. It's dated May 6, 2019, which ironically is today. We met at 8 o'clock this morning, rather early. And here are the minutes of that meeting. Several pieces of information were shared at this meeting, which included copies of the minutes from the March and April Finance Committee meetings, a financial analysis, an estimate of projected general fund revenue for 2018-19, a projected amended budget for 2018-19, and a copy of the audit report prepared by Plant Moran dated October 4th, 2018. Mr. Kling, Director of Finance, effective March 18, 2019, reviewed information with the group and highlighted the fact that revenue is based on student count. This year's projection is 300 students short of the projected count. 135 positions have been lost and replaced with 85 positions who are starting at an entry-level salary. The district has had to fill open positions with subs, which have increased costs. This all from Mr. Kling. The biggest change is the decrease in state aid, which is $2 million. There was a major adjustment to the special education revenue as the district is required to return 27.34% of these funds back to Wayne County RESA. RESA carried a fund balance of over $200 million, while their operations are annually over $100 million. A very healthy fund equity. Mr. Neal questioned how the projections for property taxes were calculated. Mr. Kling worked with the finance department at RESA, and this figure is purposely conservative. Compensation scenarios and budget projections are based on the number of current employees and vacant positions. There has to be an understanding of what the unions are asking for in terms of compensation during the negotiation process. Dr. Holt noted that this information was needed for negotiations. She also shared that she had asked for an in-depth audit, which was not done by the former superintendent after conversations she had had with union leadership. Plant Moran completed the audit and noted several findings. Cleanup is taking place to put this department in order, and a structure is being created to put the right people in the right place. Procedures are being put in place to guide the work going forward. Budgets will be expended appropriately. It was questioned why the board did not receive a budget report each month and why they didn't ask for one. Mr. Bucklew shared that this would be a good practice for the board to adopt. Mr. Bucklew noted that the Michigan Association of School Boards recommends a 15% fund equity balance. He appreciated the amount of time and effort on Mr. Kling's part to present this information. He thanked the staff at RESA and others for support. He reminded everyone that we are at the mercy of the state of Michigan as far as funding goes. Mr. Kling will cost out projections for bargaining groups for the purpose of negotiations to ensure that the district does not fall behind in the next 3 to 5 years. A complete copy of the minutes from this meeting can be found on pages 3 and 4 in the agenda book of this evening's meeting. I would just add one thing. While there is a recommendation for 15% fund equity, we have a policy asking that we maintain a 5 to 10% fund equity, which may or may not still be appropriate given our new financial circumstances. And that's it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the finance report?
Am I able to speak?
Please do.
I just want to note that after Mr. Bucklew made that statement earlier today, just note that based on our current board policy manual, we have not seen the statement that you're talking about in our current board policy manual.
Is that right?
So if that is the case, and we want to move forward in that direction, that's what we went and checked. And perhaps we're thinking that in the consolidation of the board policy manual, that was one of those things that was consolidated and is not explicitly stated. So we did not find it today, but we want to make sure that moving forward, we have some kind of guidance in that direction.
If it's the pleasure of the policy committee and the remainder of the board, that we adopt a different recommendation for a district fund equity, I would be more than open to that.
Or the one that you stated, I mean, that, the 5 to 10%, but we just wanted to make sure it was in writing.
Perhaps, yes.
I was just saying, because the reason that we had put it in place was because, you know, if we go below the 5%, we would get in trouble with the state. So we wanted to make sure that not only this board, but future boards and whoever was in charge would understand the gravity of us having at least a 5%. So I don't know what happened to it, but
I
we
don't
did
know
have
either,
it.
but you do recall it.
I
We
do
were,
recall it.
as a district, we were dealing with some serious financial difficulties
Absolutely.
at that time. Revenue was down, student count was down. We had just lost the Wayne Westland language.
Yes.
And we were scrambling.
Gary Martin was the business director.
Sam?
Gary.
Gary Martin was the business director at the time.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that that happened. It's just a matter of, since the board consolidation of the policy manual, that's the one I operate off of. And so as we're moving forward, knowing that we're in, I mean, as we know, we're literally in the middle of contract negotiations, we want to make sure that what we are saying is actually what's in writing. And so if that's the case, we know we have policy committee coming up tomorrow. We could definitely make sure that that gets back in there. But I just wanted to point out when, after you said that, we went and checked, and we just want to dot every I, cross every T.
Comments from other members?
I just had a quick question. So exactly how much is in the fund balance right now?
You're about to find out.
Oh,
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% at this moment, but it may not, am I close?
I think,
it'll be part of the
if I may, so I apologize for my tardiness too, by the way, board and Dr. Holt. I think we would have to go by what the audit has.
Okay.
At any given point, so that would be the 18,800,000.
I'm sorry?
The 18,830,000. That's
Okay.
the audited number after last year.
Okay.
So I would go,
You would go with that
I would
number?
go with that. Anything else is just speculation.
Okay,
Absolutely.
fair enough.
Other members? I certainly agree that the basement of that number has to be 5%. I mean, obviously, the state is, they're going to be back talking with us if we maintain any kind of a fund balance below 5%. So that's got to be the basement of our numbers. In any event, I agree, it needs to be stated. It needs to be board policy.
The other piece of that is it has to be something realistic. We should talk with Mr. Kling about what he thinks would be an appropriate basement number. You might very well be right. 5% might be the kind of conservative number that we want, but maybe it's 10%. And I'm not suggesting it should be one thing or the other, only that it should be something that we can live with.
Yeah. I was yelled at to talking to Mike. I think when you're looking at a fund balance, anything below 5%, the state's going to get involved. And when the state gets involved, they require you to do a lot more reporting than what you would normally do.
Yep.
So we want to be well north of 5%, in my personal opinion.
I think we also have to consider that with the bond initiative and implementation of the bond program and the construction that's going to take place, many of the things that a school district would foresee they need a fund balance for is going to be taken care of in this bond initiative. So we have to establish what percentage is reasonable, given the work that we're going to be doing in the district over the next 3 years, and the fact that, the taxpayer intends for us to take these monies and put them into education, not into the savings account. At least that's what I believe. Shauna?
Well, I was gonna say, I think that the 5%, just for a policy's sake, is a good number, because if you go below that, you're in trouble. And anything that exceeds that is a bonus, but as far as policy in writing, it needs to at least say that we have to have a 5% fund balance, or however you say it. But the numbers, however you just wanna be above that. So I don't think you have to get into details about what that looks like, as long as it's above 5%.
Mrs. Madell?
I was going to just say the same thing about her statement. You know, when we originally talked about this, we were in a much more dire circumstances in the district financially, and there was quite a bit of discussion about making it the 5%, and that was before the state set the benchmark for us too, because we were looking at possibly cutting out busing and things like that, and it's hard to justify having a large percentage sitting there when you're having students walk to school. So we did set it at 5%. That was a little contentious, but we've been able to maintain a lot of our programs and transportation and things like that in the district without dipping below that 5%. So, yeah, realistically, just putting in the bottom line is probably a good thing, but 10%, 20%, we're just gonna start getting questions.
Well, sure, Mr. Neal.
And I stand corrected. It's right here on page 25 of 36. It says to make that, so I stand completely corrected. Thank you.
Let's let Mr. Neal make his comments.
Well, if I hear Dr. Holt correctly, it is going to be important to have a number. If it's already there, good. Because as she goes into the financial portion of negotiations, the amount available from the reserve fund is going to be critical as far as discussions go for monies. You know, if we follow MASB and have 15%, you're talking about maybe only a million or two being available out of our current 18,000 identified. If you're talking 5%, well, that's a much bigger number when you're talking about negotiating and talking about how much money is in reserve. So no, the union is interested to know what that reserve account may do in the way of negotiations. And then when we talk about the number, what does it say? I missed the actual amount.
My apologies. It's on page 25 of 36. It says, "The Board of Education recognizes the good fiscal management comprises the foundational support of the entire school system. To make that support as effective as possible, the board intends to maintain a fund balance of between 5% and 10% of the district's general fund annual operating expenditures."
But, well, that's good. I don't need to say much more, because I
Yeah.
think your recommendation is
Thank
we'd be
you.
north of 5%. MASB says 15, although that's not what we're calling for, but as long as we're up above 5, I think.
Mr. Buckaloo?
So listening to a number of the things that are being said today, it occurs to me that fund balance today probably isn't that big of a deal because of the fact that we have bond money and we're going to be able to take care of a lot of things with bond funding that might otherwise be determined emergencies. Going forward down 5, 8 years into the future, we might need the insurance that a more healthy fund equity would provide to us. The whole idea of the fund equity is to take care of that boiler that goes bad, or the need to replace a bus that we hadn't really budgeted for. And once we're through spending the bond money, probably we're going to need a higher level of fund equity. We might just simply leave things the way they are, but keep in the back of our minds that it's something that we may need to revisit 5 years down the road, 6 years, and that's a long time to remember anything, particularly for somebody like someone my age. But it's all relative to what our emergency needs are gonna be, or could possibly be.
Yes, that's exactly what I think. Over the next 2 years, we're going to be doing a lot of this work. And if we were looking at, boilers that were 25 years old and roofs that were 20 years old, we would have to look at but, there's a lot of dollars between 5% and 10%. I actually think that we need to take a percentage, establish what percentage that's going to be. This is the we won't fall below percentage, and I don't think it can be 5%, because 5% is zero according to the state.
Yeah, I would agree.
If we set our fund equity too high, we limit our ability to spend that money on other day-to-day things, and I'm thinking, and this may be the wrong time to bring it up, but it might impact our ability to award compensation to our employees, as an example of something.
Well, I know there are districts that have 15%, even over 15%, and I would not want to have to present to the taxpayer that we're taking that money and just leaving it sit in the bank when we don't have in our mind that we're going to need to spend. If we could say we need a 15% or an 18% fund equity because we're going to have 3 roofs that need to be replaced in the next 3 years, and we have, that's one thing, but we're not going to be in that position as a consequence, like you said, of the bond issue and our transportation acquisitions we're going to be making. So that's why I say, even for more reason, rather than say between 5 and 10%, maybe we identify a percentage. Dr. Weaver?
Yes, in order to facilitate this, maybe it would be good to throw out a number that's not 10%, but is north of 5%, which is somewhere around 8% or 7.5%. Because I do agree, with Mr. Cox that 5% is actually zero as far as the state is concerned. So I think that it doesn't move us into a place where we can't negotiate with our employees and give them a good raise, but at the same time, it keeps us from getting to ground zero. Just a thought.
Mr. President?
Melody?
Just one quick question. Don't we have to renew a sinking fund as well? When does that due? The sinking fund?
It would be with your L4029, which is when you redo your mills, you have to make sure you go out for it again.
Okay,
And
so when
I
is,
think that has to go to the board in June.
June, okay.
My suggestion is that since the policy committee is meeting tomorrow, that they add that to their agenda to talk about, with whoever needs to with the necessary information, and to bring it back to the board, for the next meeting or.
I see no problem with leaving the language with a range, but maybe we should, as a board, annually set what that year's reserve would be intended to be. So for instance, we have a range of 5 to 10, and based on what I see, you saying, that maybe 8% should be this year's projected fund reserve, and then that gives Dr. Holt actual number from which to work when she's dealing with the employees. And rather than say, well, they want somewhere between this and that, and there's nothing really hard and firm to work from.
It seems to me, and I understand what you're saying, Mrs. Walker, but we have the full board here. It sounds to me like, I think 8% is a good number.
Well, what I was gonna say next was that it's just a matter of wording, so if you change it to not to go less than 5%, then you have room to play, but whatever, it's fine with me.
I think 8% is financially responsible.
It's not pushing the line to zero, and it's not overly unburdening the district. 7.5, 8, I'm just throwing that out there. I'm certainly going to respect whatever the number is, but
Mr. Klein?
Also, what it does is it gives you flux in case for some reason something were to come up in the district that we weren't ready for. It gives you that little barrier to get back and prepared for it. So I think having a little, like you said, a little buffer from that 5 is a good idea.
So I
Shauna?
guess my question would be, you're about to present the budget, when you present the budget and you looked at the numbers, if you see that that's a feasible number, then I guess that would be, what will work with our budget, that's what I'm trying to say. So if we do it each year, I guess it depends on what our budget is looking like, where we set it at.
Well, so
You
I think
understand what I'm saying?
what fund balance will work with our budget?
Yeah, so,
The fund, so it's
so
the
we can
reserve.
support 8%.
So you already support 8%.
Right.
It would be based on negotiations on how that goes, how your fund balance in the future goes. Whether so it's excess over it's expenditures over revenue. So it would be the next couple of years that determine how low that fund balance goes, and then based on if we had multiple years of expenditures over revenue and we were tracking down to that 8%, we might be at 9% and have to rethink, okay, the last 5 years had X amount over revenue, we have to rethink, because next year that means we're gonna be pushed. Do you know what I mean?
That's
So
what I was trying to
yeah.
say, but you are the numbers man, and you said it eloquently. Thank you.
So, yeah, it gives you a range, and like I said, it gives you a buffer so that if you do hit 8, you have that time to now reevaluate and say, okay, we've already hit 8, we can't go any lower, let's plan this.
Just,
Mr.
and
Buckler?
I'm sure everyone's aware of this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. If we set it at 8%, it's a good number, and we find ourselves short of cash, our revenue for some reason is down, and all of a sudden, we're looking like we're gonna have 6 or 7% fund equity, then what we're saying to the superintendent is she has to make cuts. Get rid of a teacher, cut a program to get our fund equity back up to the 8% that she cannot spend into that 8% that we're saying must be fund equity. So if we understand that we're making that kind of a demand on the superintendent and what programs and employees she she provides for the district, then that's okay, just so long as we understand that's what we're doing.
Mr. Buckaloo, I'm sorry.
Mr. Neal.
Would you be willing to accept in that, let's say we're at 8%, but there's a real emergency that comes up? You know, that would, you know, we would have to take care of a roof caves in or something like that. But other than that, when our fund equity gets down to about 10% or so, I'm just throwing out numbers, that the superintendent and her financial team would have to get together and say, okay, wait, you know, where can we slow this up? You know,
Absolutely, and
I mean, the only reason to dip between 8%,
we can always come back and Dr. Holt can say, hey, look, we're in a bind. We're either gonna lose a teacher or we're gonna come up with a different fund equity number. I'm sure we'd come up with a different number.
yeah.
Mr. Neal.
But we just, you know, if we just pick a number out of the air, and it has nothing to do with the numbers you're coming up with this year, with the numbers you're coming up with next year, with the year after. If all we're doing is making up a percentage, I don't know that's wise. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm inventing problems. People say sometimes I overthink things, but,
Mr. Neal?
Well, I guess what I hear is getting close to kind of what I'm thinking, and that is, I think the language should remain the same or similar with maybe a little caveat. And that is that our fund equity should be between 5 and 10%. But that we look at this year, and by example, this year we've got 18 million plus sitting there, which is well over that amount, well over 10%. And say to ourselves, well, why don't we identify for this year 8% fund equity? And that way Dr. Holt, when she goes to negotiations, can say, well, when we're negotiating, we have to keep in mind, we have to maintain an 8% equity, that's what the board has established for this year. And then if the emergency does come up, we're not saying that teachers have to be cut or anything else, we're just saying under emergency circumstances, we still have the 5 as our basement. We can allow for that, although we were trying to maintain the 8%.
Personally, I don't like the range 5 to 10% because the state of Michigan isn't using a range. They say 5%. If it's under 5%, then you're in violation. So Dr. Holt is going to have to use that number at 5% anyway when she makes her calculations. All we're talking about, halfway between 5 and 10, 8 or thereabouts, is just 3 percentage points more. So it seems to me, Mr. Kling, do you have some?
Well, I was just gonna say, what that does is it gives you, like, the board said, it gives you that emergency, so that if you're at 8, it gives you that emergency of a couple percentage points to 5, so that we're not dealing with, okay, we're at 5 now, and now we have an emergency, now we're getting audited by the state and doing extra financial information. So what that 8% does is allow you to have an emergency and still be above the state threshold.
Plus, we have a defined threshold.
And it's
Not
defined.
a
It's-
5%, with the size of our budget, 5% is a considerable amount of money to say, yeah, well, 5 million. You know, that's I would suggest that we prepare a resolution for the next meeting and have 8% be the number.
And we can work that through policy tomorrow?
Well, it's kind of
And
been
bring
worked-
it back?
Kind of been worked through.
Okay,
I mean, I think.
okay. That's fine with me, I'm just,
We do that?
So we'll work on some language, I think, what I'm hearing is combine both of these to say that what I'm hearing is, as we're negotiating, we want to keep at an 8%,
Yes.
but at no point will we ever fall below 5. And if we ever get to between 5 and 8, then things need to be brought to the board's attention so that you know what's going on. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that
Well,
you might be hearing that at somewhere around 10% that you begin to slow spending somehow.
Of course.
That really we don't you know, if we have to go to 5 because of an emergency, we have to do it. But 8% would be the.
Yeah, if 8% is the number, then that's the number, not
Okay.
5.
Yeah.
8.
Right.
And I think that that's a defensible number to the community who's paying the bills, because we don't want to be sitting at 50% fund balance. And I think something over what the state minimum is also prudent, and that's 8, so.
Through the chair to Mr. Kling, Fred Weaver.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you had a moment there.
I'm like, sorry about that.
Do you see coming down the line, I think we signed a resolution last month, is the state going to go to this fair and equitable for every district, or are they still going to allow hold harmless districts to reign over us?
I don't know that at this time, but I
I
can look into
understand.
it.
Yep, thanks.
Any more discussion on Mr. Buckaloo's report? Hearing none? Pardon me?
Thorough.
Yes. We'll go to 303.19, which is review and approval of business service and finance items. Mrs. Simmons?
Thank you, President Cox. I am going to turn this over to Mr. Devin Kling, who is going to review the amended budget.
Should I go up there or stay here? Should I go up there
You're
or stay
fine
here?
right there.
Okay.
That's your seat.
All right.
Mr. Cox, where is the, where are we at? What paperwork are we on?
Did you get,
Okay, thank you. Financial analysis,
Yep, that's right.
okay.
So the first page is the financial analysis. This is gonna have both your revenue and expenditures. At the top, you see beginning fund balance. That's our audited numbers. So that's based on the 2017-18 audit. That's where we came out with. We have June 2018, the amended budget. This is the preliminary budget. Right next to that, to the right, we have May 2019. This would be the A1 or Amendment 1 budget. So they're kind of right next to each other, so you can see the differences. Let me see here. The next page, I'll go over them, but the next page has the revenue breaking out even more into more detail. You have it broken out into local, and then basically that middle part is ISD, and then state. And then the last page, which I'll go through all these, is expenditures by function. So you should, same as the other two, where you have the 2018 preliminary from June of 2018, and then you have the May 2019 A1 Amendment 1 budget right next to each other. And then to the right of those figures, so you have the totals. To the right of those, it's even broken down even more between salaries, benefits, purchase services, and so on. So basically, it's done by object code. So,
So you gotta walk them through, so let's take them back a bit,
Okay.
because I showed the 3. Walk them through kind of what we did this morning, and tell them a little bit more about the whys, like we did the finance committee this morning.
okay, sure then.
Thank you.
So, on the revenue side, we had projected to be around 110,626,000. I'm seeing that we're gonna be probably around 109,035,000. The major change would be from our state aid, and that's due to our student count dropping. The revenue page that breaks it down even more, you can see that it was 83 million
point to them which line you're
Oh,
on. Mr.
sorry.
Kling, Mr.
It's
I know
on-
you look at these all day long. Remember, they're looking at them for the first time, some of them.
Right. I'm just, the first one just is like a summary, right? It breaks down all of the revenue and expenditures into 4 line items. So it's kind of broad. It's, you can't really dive into it. So when I try to look at the revenue, I'm looking at the second page. It kind of breaks it down into the different sections. So just like Dr. Holt's doing, yell at me if I'm going too fast or,
I wouldn't say I'm yelling.
or yeah, just holler at me if you're going too fast.
I guess the first thing that jumps out at me is the $4 million difference in classroom instruction.
In classroom instruction. Oh, in the breakout?
Yes.
Yep, so that would be due, I looked at, that jumped out at me too, and so with the help of Wayne Risa, I was able to pull some reports on employment from June of last year to May of this year. We had 135, whether that would be retirees or people leaving the district, and we had 85 people join. So we had a difference of 50 employees that were contracted employees who we did not fill that year. On top of that, you have to take into account of that 135, some of those are retirees that we have now refilled at a lower rate. And so that's where your major difference is coming in, because I had the same questions about why that was so off and why it was so low. And we are just not filling a lot of positions, and the positions we are filling, they're coming in at much lower rates.
And based upon a conversation I had with Dr. Holt, when we do our fund balance projections, we're doing this with math as if all positions were filled.
When we're doing
In other
that.
words, if we have a complement of 1,000 personnel and we still have 100 that haven't been hired, when we do our projections, we're doing those projections that those 100 people have been hired and those monies are included in that.
Yes, so basically, it's what these are pulled on are what our contracts are saying, or what our obligations are per our contracts. So
Okay.
it has nothing to do with,
That's what,
yeah, it has nothing to do with forecasts or anything like that. It is obligations per contracts. And so what we're finding is when we pull that report, we had less people coming back than that were leaving. And what you can also see is an increase in object code 3s and 4s, which are your contracted services. So you're seeing a decrease in salaries and benefits, but you're seeing an increase in contracted services. And that's because we're not hiring and we have subs in some places. And
Through the chair to Mr. Kling. So those 50 or so salaries, 30 to 50, those were not expended this year.
those 50, I'm sorry,
You mentioned that 135 went out and 85 came back in.
that's correct.
So where are those salaries for those extra people?
So between not rehiring and having subs and contracted services fill the gap, that's where we're seeing the increase in object code 3000s basically increase, because we're having much more subs activity than we ever have.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, it's going to be cheaper for the district. Subs are cheaper than contracted employees, but you'll still see a little wash where you'll see salaries and benefits go down, but that contracted services go up, and that's across the board.
Well, it's not for our discussion, but
Right.
as a little boy, I remember what I used to do to subs in the class, so it's better to have those positions filled.
Absolutely, yeah.
special education also.
Yeah. Yep, special education had a huge drop too.
I don't know if this is just a difference in accounting or the methodology, or there's been a change in,
Explain it the way you did this morning.
Pardon me?
Yeah,
I said he needs to explain it the way he did this morning.
yes.
And I don't mean to
You guys
jump
get an
around, but these
understanding.
numbers are just flying off the page.
No, and I get that. I had a PowerPoint, I'm not sure. Basically, a big part of that, because when I was looking at this, I said the same thing, and that's why I reached out to Wayne Reese to just make sure, hey, we're pulling these contracts right, they're hitting our they're hitting our accounts the right way, and just to kind of make sure we had everything.
So I'm gonna back you up just a little bit. I'm gonna help you out a little bit because you
Yeah.
did an amazing job this morning. So I'm gonna just bring it all in.
Yeah.
So this morning, if you don't mind, is that
Yeah,
okay?
no, go for it.
Okay, so this morning we started off just talking about the staff turnover in our district. And what Mr. Kling pointed out is that as we've had 135 positions that have not been filled this school year, that we are different for lost last year, 85 of those positions came back, leaving approximately a 50 employee gap. And with that gap, some of those are actually positions that we are not going to fill. Some of them are actual positions that we could not fill. And so therefore, we've been using contractors and subs to be able to move this forward. The impact that that's had on our schools has been, it's been a challenge at some schools more than others, because especially in the area of special education, where we have not been able to get many of the positions filled. One, due to the number of positions that we have. Two, with the certifications that are required for special education. And three, we lose many teachers based on our pay scale. Folks can go and make more money in another place. And so you take that, combined with the declining student enrollment, we predicted 300 students were not going to return with us. We actually had about 600 students not return last school year. And so we had more of a dip. And with folks talking about the district not necessarily always in a positive light, that can be a challenge. So that's, more fodder for us as a community to continue to put our best foot forward at all times. Moving forward, what Mr. Kling talked about on the top on the financial analysis page with the revenues, you can see what we get from our local sources, our other sources, state, federal, and operating transfers. So you can see there's some differences in these numbers. And the challenge with what you have with a budget of this size is that when he is doing an amended budget, with the end of the school year coming up upon us, we wanted to make sure these numbers were as accurate as possible. So we still have about a month more to go, or a month and a half with May and June to go. But this is about where we're landing. So knowing that we were about 300 less than our projected enrollment, we have been operating, making sure that we do not spend in any way frivolously, because we knew we were going to be lower than what we projected. Especially after the fall and spring count. I mean, it's very clear. The kids aren't here, the money's not coming, we need to adjust our spending appropriately. So then you can see there within our expenditures, we did make some adjustments. Some adjustments are in classroom instruction, so we paid for some contractors and subs. Contractors are actually more expensive, subs are less expensive, so there's a difference there. And then we also did some heavy digging into our needs as a school district. So there were some positions that we needed more of. There were some positions where folks were making consolidations. As you move forward with instructional support, that's really where you can see that with our instructional support, materials, supplies, et cetera, we have become much more conservative in our spending, because with having a 600 student loss, we don't want to continue to spend in any way on things that we don't need. Furthermore, we want to prepare for the curriculum adoption, because as you know, we've had not having curriculum for several years. That's a problem. And when we start needing to purchase curriculum, you have to set money aside to make those large-scale purchases, which is part of why over the years we have not purchased. It's not that the district did not want to purchase curriculum. Quite frankly, it was more important to keep the district moving, build that fund balance. And we can place judgments on that one way or the other. It's the decisions that were decided upon at the time. Knowing that, we have spent much less because we're trying to save up for that big curriculum adoption, this year being in English language arts. With other support services, so that's where you'll see the difference between the 110 and the 106 on expenditures on that front page. Overall, on the bottom there, you see a projected fund balance. Currently, we were at about 18.9 with the June amended budget. What we're predicting right now is to be around 21.8. That fund balance right there on the bottom of the page is the reason why I put a stop or a halt on things, because I did not, if I was operating with this budget, with negotiations, when in actuality I have this, that is when the unions start to have some trouble with us, because it makes it seem like we're not telling the truth, when in actuality we adjusted our spending. But you want to make sure when you give an amended budget and they're operating off of those numbers, that we're operating off of the actual numbers. Any questions on that part so far?
One question, where is that particular page?
This
that-
page should have been right, it should have been the
was
one
connected to
That's-
this.
in that packet.
Should be the first one.
So, this one.
No,
Nope,
that's
that's
the
your,
second one.
Okay, geez.
I didn't find it easy either, Melody.
Yeah, I don't have it.
I'm borrowing from my neighbor. Oh, here it is.
There it is.
This one? Oh,
Yep,
okay.
that's it,
Thank you.
right there. Right behind all the other stuff. So then the second page is really breaking down your projected revenue. And so as I pointed out in the finance committee meeting, this page right here, our board should be getting quarterly. Quarterly, you should be receiving that report. The other line is adjust your revenue. So it takes a look at where all your money is coming from. This is where we have to go and have some conversations about why are we getting this, why aren't we getting that, where can we get more, where should we be getting less, etc. Well, never where should we be getting less. We're always going to go for more. And so you see here you have the June proposed budget and then the May 2019 proposed budget and where we are there. An important note that we had conversation about in the Finance Committee had to do with the special education, Section 51C, where you see that we proposed that we were going to get about 10.6 million, and in actuality, we received about 6.6 million. And that has to do with your Act 18 funds, and that's what the team is looking deeper into, knowing that Act 18 has a pretty healthy fund balance. That's what Mr. Buckaloo was alluding to during that conversation. So as you move further down, you can see that there are some discrepancies here and there. Quite frankly, you know, if it's not millions of dollars of discrepancy at this point, I'm not digging too deep into it, because the numbers, I'll find out the real numbers at the end of the year anyway, but it gives us a good place to start from and a good understanding of where things have fluctuated up and down. Any questions on our revenue or where our money comes from? And perhaps it's good to bring out the one you mentioned about the state aid, or the county numbers.
Mr.
Okay.
Neal.
Well, actually, this is a new question.
Okay.
And I didn't see this earlier. I would have asked it. I apologize. But under local revenue sources, there are several items, 4 or 5 items that were projected in the very beginning to be a certain rounded number that still stand as that same rounded number. And we're pretty much near the end of our year, so I'm wondering, like in the area of continuing ed, where will we get, or when will we get actual numbers? Instead of just 80,000 that was projected and 80,000 currently showing, or athletic gate receipts, 75,000, or Medicaid fee, you know, over $1 million. It's the exact same number. Obviously, you were short on time, I know. So some of these things maybe were just already there, and it was hard to get the actual details, like gate receipts and that sort of thing, but.
Is that auditable, or do you have an answer for that, or is that?
I think looking at that, like athletic gate receipts, looking at where we're at now, where we've landed in the last couple of years, and saying, yeah, I think that's pretty close. You know, I don't. If you go and say, okay, I think that's going to be 82,000 instead of 80, you know, it's.
So you've looked at the past? and
Yeah,
say
I've
these numbers have been there?
Yeah, every line item I've gone through and did a 5-year projection or look back, I guess, not projection, and examined and analyzed. Okay, where are we at right now? Where were we at last year at this time? Where were we at 2 years ago at this time? And where did we end up? And then kind of, okay, that's right around where he initially budgeted. I'm gonna go with it. Basically, I changed what I knew, and what I was confident in. And athletic gate receipts, I can look at previous years. I can see where we came up. I can see where we're at now, and I can say, yep, we're right on track for that. I'm not going to change that 1,000 here, 1,000 there. We might be at 81 instead of 80, but
Gotcha.
we're talking fractions of a percentage at the end of the day. And you know, you might be at 81, you might be at 80, and
Okay.
I think you alluded to in your first point in saying there was a lack of time, and I did go through each line item, but I changed what I knew, and what I really knew was the state aid status, reports, which they give you, which is that 81 million. That's what I was sure on, and I got
Yeah.
advice from Wayne Risa and Steve Ezekiel.
That's all I wanted to hear, was that you actually looked at something historically to see what the flow was, so that you could count on this number being somewhere in the ballpark, and not just a number you carried forward.
Right.
With no information.
Yep,
Okay.
Ms. Hines?
that's correct.
I just had a quick question with dual enrollment. Now, do we pay for that? Cause with those programs, cause I noticed that, under there was 5,280, but then for 2019, it was blank for the dual enrollment.
Yep, that was, I'm not sure about the details of it, but as of this year, we had 0 expenditures. Are you talking about in in your,
In the
your
revenue section?
Yeah, we had 0 revenue as of today, so that was one of those things where I had zeroed out because, again, we had, in previous years, I had seen revenue, this year I haven't, so I zeroed out. But as far as like the details of it, I'm not 100% sure.
So if I can help out a little bit here, part of what I've asked them to do this year is to ensure that whatever account number something is supposed to be taken out of or brought into, it is actually accurate. So what was happening before is that there was, and I don't want to make it seem like there was any impropriety, because that's not where the impropriety is coming in, but if you can think about this $110 million budget, sometimes people will put things in one code when it should actually be in another code, and we have to end up shifting over those codes. Quite honestly, when you talk about $5,280 and a $110 million budget, I wouldn't expect him to spend more than 5 minutes on that at all, because really what we're looking at is where are the big chunks of money coming from? So it very well could have been rolled into somewhere else, or as we were shifting over the account numbers, but it didn't show up in the same place that it was before.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And Plant Moran did a lot of that. That's part of the cleanup that Plant Moran was alluding to in the Finance Committee meeting, is they cleaned up a lot of object and function codes, because object and function codes were not being used appropriately. And go ahead.
And not only that, but that would be something that you would see on your state aid status report. So basically dual enrollment, it comes in through the state aid status report, and if they say they're gonna give it to you, it's a pretty good bet that you're gonna get it. On our status report, I didn't see it, so I eliminated it. I didn't really go into why or how to, if they were lying to us, but they don't really lie. If the state tells you, especially in May, you should have a really good idea of where you're gonna stand on your state revenue right today, so.
Can we talk in a little bit more detail about Act 18? There's a $4 million swing. And
I can-
so,
I can talk to that. So with your Act 18 money, a percentage of that at the end of the year goes back. It's 27.163, I believe. I can double check that number, but a percentage of that goes back to the ISD. In previous years, what I was seeing on our books was it was coming out of various accounts. So what was done was when we wrote that journal entry back to the ISD, it would come out of 22A, half of it, and the other half would come out of Act 18.
excuse me,
All
when you
right,
say
maybe.
27, you mean 27%?
Yeah, so, yep, so just over $3 million, I believe. I can double check that number too, but basically, what I did was I accounted for that. I worked with Steve Ezekiel on this to find out exactly what that number was gonna be so that we knew that liability was in this revenue. In prior years, I think this number was higher because that money was being taken out of 2 accounts, maybe 51C and maybe 22A.
So here's what, so if it comes in here, it's supposed to go out here. If it comes in here and then you take it out of, let's say, a section 20 or 147, you're not, this is going to be.
In my opinion, and I kind of brainstormed with Steve, it's special ed money that's going back to the ISD, so it should come out of 51C, and he agreed. So I just took it out of 51C instead of spreading it out. I took it out of 1 because that's ultimately where that revenue is coming. You get that revenue, and then it has to go back at the end of the year.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Fred, what I'm just curious about is, why would you not take it out of that account? What is the reason that somebody would pay it, or somebody would assess the liability against, other than the 51C?
I'm not sure.
We don't know.
I'm not sure. And ultimately, it's
That's what you're
all,
talking about?
That's what I've been talking about.
it's all, in reality, this is a pool of money that you're getting. Now, they're designated to different things, but it's a pool of money. So, you know, at the end of the day, if you took it out of 22A or 51C, your total state funds would still be the same. It's just not showing it exactly what it's for. And that's, again, I'm not sure.
I can't imagine. Fred?
Well, I just wondered, are these use it or lose it monies that we have to send back to the ISD, or they automatically come out?
This is automatically, this is
Automatic.
part
And
of,
what
yeah.
what is the reason for that? Why,
It's a-
why are we feeding the ISD?
It's part of the Act 18 process. It's done every year. This journal entry is done every year. I don't know if you guys just didn't know about it, but every year
No,
they're,
we knew.
oh, you do, okay. So,
Some did, some didn't.
I just don't, I can't understand, and I can't come, I thought what you were going to say is that it's a place to put it so that you don't have to give it back. But I don't understand why if the accounting works out the same, as it does,
yeah.
and I think, Dr. Holt, you've said, the accounting is solid, it just is not coming out of the proper account, and I still can't figure out why that is.
That's what we're cleaning up,
I'm not
and we're gonna
sure
make
either.
sure it's correct moving forward. This is why we have processes, procedures, and checks and balances, so that no matter who is sitting in that seat, we should all know and be very clear about what's happening with the budget, and that's part of the challenge.
So my final comment on this item, though, is that we're not going to have a $4 million surprise that there's $4 million here we didn't know about.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
And that's something like I said, a lot of
Your
these
knowledge
things-
is the one we're counting on.
Right, right, and that's part of the reason why I used resources that I had to double check to say, hey, is this right? Is this should this be coming out of 51C, and they should be. So
Mr. Kling, is there a possible scenario where you're trying to take money out of 51C, and I'm assuming that's to reimburse the 27+%? Is there a scenario where you might have to take general fund money and put into the 51C in order to have enough to meet that 27% payback? Or are we doing something where by taking money from 51C, but also from some other account, we're keeping money in the 51C account?
no, this would just be money so you get the money in, you receive the money as revenue, and then at the end of the year it has to go back out, and so
So there's no chance of you having a deficit in your 51C account when it comes time to pay back RESA?
no. So you'll never have a deficit. So at the end of the year, we'll probably have, let me see here. I just want to make sure I say this right. So we'll probably have 9 million, maybe close to 10 million, but then that money has to go back. And basically what it is the ISD gives it out, and then they do their calculations, and then they request it back. And so this isn't ever going to be a deficit. This is just basically extra money that the ISD gives you. Yeah, like in advance. And it gives it to you, and then at the end of the year, they recalculate it, and you have to send it back. So it's never going to be, you're never going to go in the red with it.
Mr. Knapp?
Just to make sure that I'm not misreading something, when I look at the more detailed breakdown for special ed, it shows that our new amended budget would show 7,193,000 plus. And then over here on the revenue for special ed, is that the only monies that we rely on? Is it the 6.6 million that we end up with?
No. No,
Okay.
special ed is supported by a number of different things.
Okay.
Have we heard anything from the county about sending us special ed money for transportation again this year? Because they've done it for the last couple of years. I don't know.
Not that I've heard of.
You haven't heard?
Nope.
Okay.
See, I don't think everybody remembers the fight that's been going back, even back when Michelle was here, about back and forth with the ISD about that.
I remember.
About them having
things are tight over there.
Yeah.
But they're not tight over there.
Not in Act 18, it
So that's
isn't.
something that we've been, that it's been an ongoing, fight back and forth.
Have they offered any reasoning for why they're holding on? Here, we're having a discussion tonight about not having a
They
10%.
don't wanna see their money, they don't wanna see their bank account low, in case of
One
an
year-
emergency.
They
One,
did
one year
come-
they got stuck with chargebacks from the federal government, and they had dispersed way more money than the chargebacks, and they got stuck in a deficit. So ever since that time, they've always made sure that they had this real fluffy cushion there.
I'll say.
Yeah, they even sent representatives over to talk to us at one point about why they do that. It didn't set well here, as I remember the meeting, because they're sitting on top of money that our district should have. So,
Sure.
you know, I thought they were more or less feeding us in some areas. So if we're feeding them, they should be feeding us back.
Dr. Holt, do you have any comments on this?
The argument that they
What-
use, and it may or may not be valid, is that their sources of revenue for special education are tenuous, that what they get this year may not be what they get next year. And so they feel they need to maintain this hefty fund equity.
Do you know the heftiness of that? What is the amount, do you know?
It's about 110% of their annual budget.
It's big, millions.
So they're sitting on about $200 million in fund equity.
Yeah, well, that's a terrible place to be.
Other comments from members of the board? The recommendation is a motion to approve the budget as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Walker, supported by Dr. Weaver. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, Mr. Neal?
Mr. Neal, yes. Mr. Buckaloo?
Yes,
Mrs. Madell?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Dr. Weaver?
Yes,
Ms. Hines?
Yes.
And President Cox?
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you very much. Long awaited, and appreciate all your hard work to get that to us. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Holt?
Thank you, Mr. President, and I would be remiss not to acknowledge Ms. Simmons and Mr. Kling and their team in our finance department. Mr. Kling getting us the budget. You've been here, what, 6 weeks now? You started March 18th. And so, thank you. I know this has been a true labor of love. I know I've pushed you, Jill's pushed you. There's been so much, and thank you for this. And I'm just glad that this is something that we could get to be able to move that important negotiation process forward. And I'm glad you had some conversations with our teams today. And to Ms. Simmons, I know you have stepped out of the box and done more finance work than any ECGR, HR, ER, you name the letters. You have done more than any of them. And that has been huge for you and your family. I know your husband has not been doing too well, and you're still here. Your basement's flooded, you're still here. And doing more negotiation scenarios. I found out she's doing, at one point, up to 80 scenarios. Keep in mind, folks, we do about 3 to 5. This one has done up to 80 scenarios for various bargaining unit groups. And typically, while that's done, work is done in the finance department, this is a true example of how our team just pulls in, comes together, and gets the job done, no matter what the position, no matter what the title. So I thank you, Ms. Simmons, and your family, because I know you have done a huge job. And also managing our negotiation processes, 9 bargaining units all at the same time. And I've received very, very few calls. So that speaks volumes to the way you communicate. So thank you for that. The only things I want to say is that last year I made it a point to ensure that I cut or reduced as far from the classroom as possible. And I started with central office very intentionally. And as a result, we have seen that we've actually added more to our school sites and the support that they have at the building level, and been able to reduce some of the strain on our budget from our central office employees. That all being said, we still must maintain our student count. And spreading the good news in our community as opposed to the bad news is part of the image that we need to work on in order to focus on what is most important. It starts here, you know, from where we are and from where we sit. And I'm always saying we're going to spread good news like it's bad news. Because if it was not good, everybody would know about it. And the good stuff, we tend to want to keep to ourselves. So we have to keep spreading that good news message if we plan on keeping our children. We cannot allow people, wherever they are from, to speak down in any way about our district and our schools, because we see what happens in our numbers and in our community. We have to show everyone that we are united. So in order to move that forward, hopefully we have a united team to be able to increase our student achievement, increase our student count, get our employees paid, because I've said I am not going to be the superintendent who is sitting here and does not get our employees paid, period, dot, end of story. And so hearing the board come together around that 8% number, quite frankly, makes me overjoyed, because it gives us a target to move forward, and the work is going to continue. We're going to do everything we can to come back with tentative agreements on June 10th. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. Next item on the agenda is 305.19. This is citizens' comments. In this portion, citizens are welcome to come to the lectern and discuss anything in general. Doesn't have to be on the agenda. Are there any citizens that would like to address the board? So we can hear you through the mic.
Oh, okay. Good. Gina Wilson Stewart, two hats, one Western Wayne County NAACP, and the other one is the Telegram newspaper. The first one was just a question on it was one of the reports that was there, and I know when you gave your report, you said you were able to look from this point to this point last year, and then you'll be able to just compare the numbers. And I remember on one of the reports, I think it was the financial analysis, I think Superintendent mentioned that it's something that needs to be received quarterly. And I want to know, is that so that it can be compared quarterly to quarterly to see if you're on track? And if it is, when will you plan on start getting those?
Actually, at this portion of the meeting, that we welcome you to come up and say whatever you like. And under the circumstances today, we're going to answer the question. But typically, we would get back to you to answer the question. Mm-hmm. But the answer to the question is, we just want to know what the running numbers are, you know, from quarter to quarter. It's there's a lot going on, and the board has a responsibility, an oversight responsibility to the finances. This is the people's money, after all, and we just want to make sure that things are being expended and there aren't any surprises being developed throughout the year.
Okay, good. All right, so my next one is the Telegram newspaper, and we focus on positive news. So I would like to have an opportunity to sit down with you and the superintendent to write a great positive story about the district whenever your schedules allow.
That would be wonderful. I look forward to that. And thank you for being here tonight.
All right.
Are there any other citizens? Ma'am?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. We'll go to the next item on our agenda, 306.19, which is review and recommendation of the boards of education. Mr. Buckaloo?
Well, I'd like to start by thanking all of the citizens, all of the people from the community that showed up. Also this, there's only one person in this room that doesn't take a little bit of money from the school district. That would be you. The rest of us do, although the board members don't get a whole lot. We're a business unlike just about any other business in the world. We're all about the employees, all of the teachers, all of the bus drivers, all the cafeteria workers, all of the counselors. We are top-heavy in people, and we always will be. Every school district is. So maybe 90% of our budget, maybe a little bit more than 90% of our budget goes into salaries. Actual classroom teachers and all of the people that support those classroom teachers. And our revenue is driven by people too. It's driven by the number of kids that we get. Overwhelmingly, the money that we receive to run this district comes from our enrollment. The loss of 600 kids is, I can't do that kind of math, but it's a significant amount of money that we did not get this year. And so we need to bring more people into the district. It's much easier to grow with more students than it is to contract with fewer students. That's always been the case. And some of our teachers are, in terms of dollars and cents, more efficient than others. For example, a classroom teacher at the high school might have 33, 32, 34 kids in his classroom. Unless, of course, he's special education, in which case there are specific guidelines. That teacher might have 4 or 5 or 6 students, maybe a little more, maybe a little bit less. Much more expensive to educate a special education student because of the restrictions on the number of students that can be in that program. That's why it's so important that we have so many grants assisting us, because without those, we're really reduced to the fact of paying for that special education classroom out of the foundation grant, the same as we would out of the English class or the PE class. So we have to be aware when we're talking about budget of just how important paying the people who deliver services are. It's almost everything that we do. And hopefully we can put ourselves in a position in the near future where we're going to be able to attract more people to this school district because we're competitive. And there's another problem too. There's a shortage of special education teachers out there. They are at a premium. Universities aren't turning them out. And that's another part of the puzzle too. We have to become more attractive, but we also have to become better at recruiting people to our district.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Weaver?
Yes, thank you. I hope that negotiations are going well for our employees. One thing's been mentioned tonight is that we have trouble attracting employees or teachers because of the salary. So if that's true, euphemism here, we killed 2 birds with 1 stone. If we come up with good contracts and salaries that will bring teachers to the district. So, you know, I hope that, you know, because several board members, maybe up to 5 board members, I remember in one meeting, expressed their concern that we get good contracts this year for our teachers and the workers. Also, I just want to say, Mr. Kling, you were thrown into the deep end tonight, and I thought you acquitted yourself very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Mrs. Mendel?
I also would like to thank everybody who has been part of this process. I think it's a yeoman's task that you were given, and you have exceeded our expectations. I figured you'd be working on budget issues much longer than this, so a lot of kudos to everybody who was part of this process. It's not ever an easy task, you know, but you guys rose to the occasion, and I personally appreciate it. And I know our district will, in the long run, be better because you were able to accomplish this. I'm not very good at making sure that I say what I really want to say off the cuff, so I crafted a statement to help me get through this next part. And it's, I lived in this community since I was 10 years old. I went to school here, I worked here, met my husband here, raised my family here, was elected to school board about 10 years ago this month. And I've experienced a lot of positive and negative things since that time that I took office, but I'm still here. Before entering this board, I began taking classes at MASB before I actually took my seat. And MASB, of course, is Michigan Association of School Boards. This organization has many lessons to teach us as trustees and as school boards. in working together for the betterment of our students and the district. I listened closely to all that they had to teach me. Some of the lessons were trustees do not bring personal drama to the board table. Trustees are the district cheerleaders, and we share and celebrate good things that happen in our district, especially when our employees and students are involved. Trustees are responsible to our stakeholders to represent all of them to the best of our ability and not our personal needs and issues. Trustees are expected to do the research that is needed to make the best decisions for our students. Recently, I feel that some of these lessons have been forgotten about. Recently, I haven't heard everybody celebrating the hard work that our students and our employees are doing in our district. Recently, I have not heard everybody representing the stakeholders. Recently, there was a young man who stood at the podium expressing his concern for himself and his family. I feel that we failed this young man. In the past, our board has followed through to make sure that student needs are met to the best of our abilities, but we failed this young man. When I was in the classroom, it was an unwritten tradition that we all looked out for all of our district students, including the students of the employees. It can be very difficult on employees' kids. I'm almost positive that this is why many of our employees with children choose to live outside of our district. I applaud those who have chosen to live here and have children attend our district. I know personally that this is not easy for them. As I said, I raised my 2 daughters here. But we all failed this young man in the end. I pray that we find a way to protect our students, including the students of our employees. For that young man who had the courage to stand in front of us, we're too late. He's gone. On 2 different occasions at this board table, I've witnessed our superintendent being disrespected. Each time I expressed my concern to my board president because that's how I was taught by MASB to handle these kinds of situations. MASB teaches us that disrespect has no place at the table, that a trustee needs to speak privately about the concerns because they have nothing to do with students, district finances, student achievement, or the regular business of a school board. I too have been disrespected on numerous occasions, but until last meeting, it's always been done privately and not in public. I personally have been forgiving because that was the lesson that I learned a long time ago. But it would appear that my way of handling these problems have been perceived as weakness. Personally, I spend a lot of hours on the business of this school district asking those hard questions. This disrespect is going to stop today. I will no longer sit in silence when this disrespect is aimed at me or any other person at this table. I do not stand up against disrespectful behavior and words of that disrespect, then I stand for nothing. I, like many on this board, including our superintendent, are here for the students and the stakeholders. I'm not here for my own fulfillment. I'm not here to build myself up or denigrate others. Words have power, and they need to be used to build up, not tear down. I take the lessons that I learned from MASB seriously, and I know that we are all better than this. When we work together as a team, the district prospers. What has happened here lately is not working for any of us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Carol. Mrs. Walker?
I don't really have anything to say this evening, but just thank you guys for your hard work. I know that when we had our meeting earlier, we went around the room and we introduced ourselves, and we all were supposed to say something positive that happened this weekend. The only thing that was positive for Devin to say is that he spent the whole weekend working. And so I just want to say that we appreciate that, and I understand that you guys have a long night. And so in the process, just take care of yourselves as you take care of our employees. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker. Mr. Neal?
Yes, thanks to Mrs. Simmons for your hard work, Curry for yours, Mr. Kling, exceptionally good work. I love the answers they provided. I could tell that you were immersed fully in it and knew what you were talking about. It made me feel better to ask questions for which you actually had the answers, and that was very good. And Dr. Always, thank you for your good work.
Ms. Hines?
Devin, you did an awesome job with the little amount of time that you have. I know this is very important. You guys have been working really well with the unions. I've heard nothing but positive things, so thank you for all your hard work and time and, you know, missing out on your families. I know that can be pretty tough, and I do feel your sympathy as well with the basement, you know, flooding, but you still came in here and you're giving your 100%. That's one thing I do love about the staff in this district is they care, they give 100%. Even though they're not making enough, they're still here and they're giving their all to our children, so that's very important. One thing that is hurting to me, and I'm speaking on behalf of people to Mr. President, is the level of disrespect, like for the women just being talked over, and it's very hurtful that, you know, we don't feel as we're equal on this board. Like a lot of times we're not really being listened to. And then even the level of disrespect, just like this all started last year, we had like 200 or 300 people at a meeting over social media that wasn't even true, and that's why we're losing children in our district, all the negative comments. That's unnecessary. Like, I'm really excited about the next phase that we're going to do with the restructuring, the plan that we're going to have to get more students to the district, but at the same time, we cannot have people bashing our school district, especially if you're on this board. This is, you know, number one. If we're not positive about our students and our faculty, how can other people be positive? So our goal is to bring more students, because we're losing so many to charters right around the corner. One positive note, I was able to go to Tinkham. They had their fun days, which was awesome. And there's another event that's coming up for students. I don't know if they're interested, but they have an ACE Aviation Academy where children are able to learn how to fly. They have a simulator. And I would like something like that with the secondary redesign, another career opportunity, but they do have a camp coming up. So I'll see if I can get the information out to pass on to the students, but the deadline is by May the 31st. But it's a wonderful program. My son was able to go over the summer. It was a week class. It only cost $40. They got to work with the Tuskegee Airmen. They went on field trips, and they actually flew and landed a plane. And it's from 8th to 12th grade. So I'll make sure I get that out, because that's another career opportunity that children can have to make a lot of money. They have a position making $74,000 flying a drone. So I definitely see the vision that this district is doing with the secondary redesign. And I think Romulus has some programs too that's similar to like aviation as well. So I'd definitely like to get that out. And that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I would like to thank Dr. Townsell. You did a great job leading us in the pledge, Dr. Townsell. Thank you. Mr. Kling, pretty much the honeymoon's over. From this point on, there's going to be a lot of work involved. Just wanted you to know. Tonight, Dr. Weaver mentioned that 5 members of the Board of Education had made comments regarding employees and their concern for the employees. And I remember that evening, and I think it was 6, but I know that the 7 felt the same way too, even though they didn't actually say anything. So we certainly appreciate all of your efforts, and I know that you know that we have been eagerly awaiting reports, and we have a great concern for everybody that works in this school district. Dr. Holt tonight said a lot of positive things about her staff and all the work they've done, and I think I should say a few words about Dr. Holt, because Dr. Holt is the one that we hold accountable for this, and you got it done, and we definitely wanted to see these numbers tonight. We know that that is an essential element in the next step. We can't get there without this, and you've had a lot of pressure on you to get this. And that kind of speaks to to what both Mrs. Medell and what Ms. Hines has said. $110 million is our budget every single year. And in addition to that, this month, we're going to be selling bonds to pull another $70 million into this district. By the time we're done with this, it will be $250 million. There are going to be some frayed personalities, maybe some missteps, maybe some folks not always saying the right thing. At the same time, we're involved in a redesign. Plus, we have a lot of new people. But what you saw tonight was the Board of Education made a determination that they want to see a resolution at the next meeting regarding something that had to be heavy on your mind, which is what kind of a fund balance is this board going to want? That is an important factor. Also, nothing can happen without the board giving that direction, and the board gave it right here tonight. So yes, there are negative things that sometimes occur, and I appreciate my colleagues sharing with me, sending me letters as you did, Mrs. Hines. I appreciate that very much about your concern. But as you can see, we are moving forward. We're getting the work done, and we're doing it together, just like you saw here tonight. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your comments and your hard work. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Adele, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Neal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned.
You guys later.
Thank you.